Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy, Mr. GoodBuds, and we back again with another discussion podcast segment. This segment is going to be a very important one. We're going to be talking about environment and how to control it. And in the end, we're going to talk about some things you may need and some things you don't necessarily need. But this one's going to be a very, very important one, and because this is very important to the overall health and growth of your plants. Before we get started, just a quick word from our sponsors, Mars Hydro. Mars Hydro got heat mats with digital thermostat controllers on deck now. Plain heat mats good for indoor starting to stimulate germination or root production in clones. They are IP67 waterproof and easy to clean. A heat thermal conductive metal probe to give an accurate display and fast on and off when desired temperature is reached. UL and FCC listed and 1 year warranty. The link is in the description. Make sure you hit that up, man. These are going to be perfect to get your seeds started and to get your clones going. You can put this right up under your germination mat, your plant tray, or your seed starting tray. Go on Amazon and holler at the link in the description and make sure you pick one up right away, man. And make sure you use that code too, Mr. GoodBuds. Let's get it. All right, so first we're going to jump things off with temperature and humidity. And that's pretty much the basis to the entire environment. And the most important part of it is the temperature and humidity. Well, it's probably no most important part, but temperature and humidity is where we're going to start off at. So we're going to just go from each stage. We're going to start off with the seedlings and clones. So I'm going to start with the seedlings and clones because the seedlings and clones, both of them, neither of them have roots. So they do depend on transpiration for water, and that's basically absorbing water through their leaves. So in the seedling and the cloning stage, you're going to want those plants to be at around 68 to 77 Fahrenheit, degrees Fahrenheit. And the overall temperature, you're going to notice, is about the same during veg for the most part. Around 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And then, but seedlings do love a very, very high humidity, about 80% or higher. The higher you can get it, 100%, they love it. It'll actually help them root very, very fucking fast. So the next stage would be the veg stage. Now the veg stage, the young plants like a high humidity, but it doesn't have to be as high as in the seedling stage. Around 70% is cool. They like it high too. And remember, these plants do adapt to everything as well. And they do like the same temperatures, around 68 to 77%. As they get older, you can lower the humidity. They do adapt to it, like I said. They adapt to it rather fast. Some places, depending on where you live, like, or where you're growing at, like in my setting, in the attic type of setting, you may have very, very low humidity. And some of these things may be hard to control. Like in my instance, my humidity is almost impossible to get up really high. So when I'm doing clones, I used to keep them under a dome, and you can do things like that, or put humidifier inside the tent. Those things can help raise the humidity, but in the end you could lose it all. So those plants will adapt to that, so you don't have to completely worry about that. Same thing as in the basement setting. You can have very, very high humidity depending on where you live. I'm in Michigan, up north area is lower humidity, especially in the winter. Closer to Florida area, Miami, you're gonna have very high humidity. So we're gonna get in at the end. We're gonna actually talk about some things you may need and some things you may not need. I'm sure you heard a lot of this stuff before. In the flower stage now, you don't want to go over 82 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's due to a loss of terpenes. You can have terpene evaporation, and one of my most hated things that I have a lot, especially growing in this attic, is foxtailing. And overall heat stress from in the flowering stage, the lower you could get to here, the temperature, and no lower than, I would say no lower than about 68, because you don't want to get it too cold, because that can start to stunt the growth. But those higher temperatures will cause stress within those plants, and I get foxtailing all the time. And again with the humidity. Now humidity, you want to start to lower when you get into flowers. So you can start off around 65% in the beginning, and then mid to lower, around mid flower, you want to lower that around 55 to 50%. And then in the end, if possible, you want to try and get it as low as possible, around 45 to 45% and lower. And that's going to actually prevent a lot of things like bud rot, and powdery mildew. Those type of things you want to is keen to happen when you have high humidity settings. Plants do adjust better outside to these type of things than they do inside. So a lot of the humidity and really when we talking about in the environment, we really just talking about inside, because it is some things that you do want to try and control. Because if you watch the Patreon, then we got hell from the rain if you get a dumbass rainy season. But other than that, you really, environment is really trying to control the environment inside. Obviously, I mean, you're not gonna be able to control it outside. All right, so the next category is carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is a very confused thing and a very mythical thing in some people's eyes. They don't understand really how the carbon dioxide works. Now, carbon dioxide is one of the most essential parts in photosynthesis in the plant. So the plant's metabolism is based on uptaking carbon dioxide so it can uptake nutrients. Now, there in the atmosphere, there's always going to be a natural 300 to 400 ppms, which is perfect for growing shit. I didn't say it that time though. Haha, I can keep that. For growing plants. But that's normal as plenty, and especially when you're inside the house, if you got people in there, you talking to your plants, that's plenty, and that's all the plant needs at that time, just so it can do its normal job, what it's normally doing. Now, a lot of people think that if they add a lot of carbon dioxide to their tents, then they're just gonna automatically get bigger yields, and that's not how that works. In fact, the carbon dioxide is only to speed up metabolism. So you're gonna have to not only increase the heat, you want to increase the heat in that tent to about 77 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, but you also want to increase the food that you give in the plant, and you can increase the humidity a little bit. I don't mess with humidity. I personally don't really have too much problems with humidity. Some of these things you may even get away with without even doing anything about. I'm just letting y'all know what the basis of everything is, because I don't do anything about humidity except for drying. I didn't even write down anything about environment when drying. Yeah. I should throw that in, shouldn't I? But so that's how the carbon dioxide thing is gonna work. And now another thing with the carbon dioxide, because it's gonna work two different ways. It's kind of backwards. When you not supplementing carbon dioxide, and we're gonna get into ventilation and airflow next. When you're not supplementing carbon dioxide, you need constant ventilation and airflow to replace carbon dioxide. Like, that's specifically what the ventilation is for. And clean air, yes, and those things, yes, but you need to replace the carbon dioxide in your tent, because their plants use up the carbon dioxide and needs to be replaced. Vice versa, if you supplemented carbon dioxide, then you need to have periods of time where you turn off the ventilation and airflow, or you're gonna lose that supplement in CO2. But like I said, you need to dial in those other things as well. So when you dial in your food and your heat and the humidity along with the carbon dioxide, then you'll get better yield. And I don't personally, I haven't tried it. I haven't tried using more CO2 and giving more food. I probably personally need it, like something like that. Like, I believe that I get a lot of CO2 in my room just because of the size of my family, but it get hot as fuck up here, and that shit is a disadvantage to my growth. So when you got to think like that as well, I could supplement CO2 and be giving it more, and then you're gonna raise. I didn't mention that, but you're gonna raise it up to, what is it, 1,500? I wrote it down on this ugly ass piece of paper, but you raise it up to about 1,500 or something like that ppms, and that could help me with the heat stress. Like, I'll give it more food, but then I may not get as much foxtail, and I may get tighter bud structure. I may even get more yield. Like, you can think like that. So if you need CO2, depending on your situation, do some research and go ahead and use it. Now, I do not. I don't know if I mentioned that in the last video or this video, but I don't like those CO2 small supplements. That shit don't do shit. I'm sorry. That shit wasn't shit. And I watched a lot of videos of people actually testing it, and it still ain't do shit. And that shit just, to me, it wasn't emitting enough CO2. And when you shake up the bottle and it lets out that CO2, it does it for 5 seconds, and then it doesn't work for longer than 3 days. And then they be like, oh, it's still emitting CO2. Bullshit. That shit wasn't shit. And my shit, I actually had my yield. That girl wasn't even that high. And you could say argue and be like it's because I didn't use more food and all that shit. But it was some bullshit to me. If you wanna supplement CO2, then supplement some CO2. And I feel like getting you a tank and the hose and doing it that way, because then you got control and you know what the fuck you doing. Um, and it's dangerous as fuck. I haven't done it, but go ahead and let me know and comment down below. All right, so the last category before we get into some things that you need for the grow tent to help control these things is good ventilation and airflow. And good ventilation and airflow is easily attained with an inline fan, maybe a couple inline fans, and a bunch of regular fans. Now, I explain this right now before we even get into the needs and don'ts. You don't need an intake fan. You just need a powerful enough exhaust inline fan, because that air will be replaced through the vents. Now, in some situations, you may need that. I believe in a negative pressure in the tent as well. So I like my tent to actually like suck in, and I got it open right now, but it's normally sucking in, and I like that, and that allows me to know and be comfortable to know that I'm getting a great amount of intake. If you don't have negative pressure, then you're not getting a good intake and replacing the carbon dioxide in the tent. And so you want to know you're getting good intake. And a good trick to know what you could do is roll up and turn on your intake fan, close the tent, and then open up one of the vents, and then light the, and then you'll watch the smoke get sucked into the tent. And so that's how you can tell if you're making sure you're getting airflow replacement in your tent. And besides that, the airflow and good ventilation will help you control your temp, your humidity, and the CO2 levels. And it will control everything perfectly. So now let's get into some things that you need for the grow tent. So it's not a lot. Now, like I said, you don't need an intake fan, but you do need an exhaust fan. You have to have at least one inline fan to pull air in and exhaust air out. Now, you don't want that fan to replace the air too much, because you want CO2 to be abundant for the plant, and the fans that I mentioned will help mix that in the air for the plants. But you don't want to replace the air in there too much. That's why you need to check the CFM of your intake fan or outtake fan or whatever you're using, and then multiply your length times width times height of your tent, and that'll give you the area, and then that'll tell you how much area you have to replace cubic foot per minute. And do that math, and you want to at least replace it a couple times an hour. But it doesn't need to be replaced that often. And most intake fans going to replace it way more often than that. But I probably wouldn't want to replace it more than once a minute. So, like, do the math. Cubic foot per minute. I hope I said that. And the next thing that you do need is multiple fans. Now, I'm guilty of this because I need more fans in my tents, and I'm about to actually upgrade on that, because I feel like I don't have enough airflow in my tents. But I believe to have a very good airflow, you're going to need at least 3 fans. Now, I only got one in each of my tents. I've been getting by like that. But I can tell in a lot of instances that I need more airflow. And I've been able to tell a lot. You need one in the top to circulate the air around the top. You need one above the canopy of the plants. And then you need one down below. And this air circulation is going to help a lot. It's going to help with the powdery mildew. It's going to help with bud rot, and it's going to help with pests, especially when you got like fungus gnats. And I have fungus gnat problems a lot. So it's one of the reasons why I say I need more airflow. Because if you put a fan down by your pots and have it circulating and blowing, then the fungus gnats can't even land in the pots. Like simple shit like that, it will help tremendously. So you're going to see changes like that in my growth soon. Now, another thing you need is a humidity and temperature monitor. Obviously, if you don't have that, then when you watching the wrong video, you're not gonna be able to. You ain't gonna know shit. Go get you a humidity and a temperature monitor. Now, the next thing I say is gonna be very controversial, but for me, this is for me and the way I feel about heat and what I've learned about heat. You need an air conditioner. If you need an air conditioner flat out, because you have summertime, and in some places you may be able to get by without it. Like I know some places you can get by without it, but most places it get pretty hot in the summertime, and it get hotter than I'm in Michigan, like, you know what I'm saying, and it get hot as fuck in the house during the summertime, and it is almost impossible. Inline fans and that shit don't get rid of the heat. Like once that heat is in that room, that shit is in there, and it's hard to get rid of heat. And I've tried a lot of things, and one of the things that really only worked was the air conditioning. And so it's an investment. One of the things I say that you need, and we're not talking about equipment, we just talking about environment. But one thing you need is a good light, and another thing I believe investment is an air conditioning. Because it is extremely hard to get rid of the heat. I don't care what you do. You talking about getting ice. How many buckets of ice? You going to have buckets of water and ice blowing. No. You just you're going to have been spent every dollar. You're going to be going to the store getting $1, spending $2 on ice, and 5 times a day? So 2 times 5, $10 a day. And then, you know what I'm saying? That's going to equal an air conditioner. And you're going to be growing. And that's a lot of work when you can just turn on your air conditioner. So I believe that an air conditioner is key. Unless you're growing somewhere it really be cold, and it's hard to grow there anyway. But I believe that air conditioner is key to getting rid of heat. Like getting the temperature down, getting it down to where you need it, and not playing games. Is getting that air conditioner. A lot of people gonna disagree with that shit. I already know. I had a lot of conversations about it, but. Like I said, I'm in Michigan, so I can't imagine that it gets any less hotter than it do here in the summertime. And we all the way up north, and it gets fucking hot. And the only thing that I was able to really remedy, like completely remedy and just get it off my mind, it was an air conditioner, and especially air conditioner that controls the temperature. Like done easy. And you don't need it in the wintertime, so you good. And now we got a couple possible needs. Now, these are things that you could possibly need. A heater. Now, like I said, depending on where you live, you may need a heater all the time in your tent because it can't be too cold. And you don't want to let your temperature drop below 10 degrees. I actually thought that was bullshit, but when your lights turn off, it don't drop that. It don't drop more than 10 degrees lower. Like, it be just 10 degrees. And so I believe it. I have never had a problem with it, so I don't need a heater. But if your lights turn on and it drop lower than 10 degrees, I believe it is necessary that you'll need a heater. But if you don't have that problem, then you don't need it. That's why this is things that you may need and may not need. And the only other two things that I feel like you may and may not need is the dehumidifier or humidifier, depending on what you're doing. Now, I use a humidifier in my drying area because I like my drying area to be at 65% humidity and around 70, 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's usually always there. But I do need a humidifier because in my area it gets very, very, the humidity drops very, very low, and the plant will dry fast as fuck. If the humidity drops lower than 45%, the plant dries really fucking fast. Like I find keeping it at 65% in about 8 to 10 days, and around 70%, around 70 to 65, 70 degrees. The air conditioner don't work in that far away in my drying area. I would prefer to get the degrees lower than that. Ideally, I would like it around 55, 65. Once you start drying and curing, you like the temperatures to be like a little cooler, cool dark places. That's why you keep it in cool dark places to preserve the best way. So yeah, but I don't have a problem with it for real. But that's a may or may not need. I have a dehumidifier, but I never get a chance to use it. I just used it for my first time when I was drying my pollen. And the only reason I used it was to absorb the moisture, and I couldn't use the fan because I didn't want to blow the pollen all over the place. So I hadn't used it. It had spider webs on it. I hadn't used it in so long since I overdried the shit out of my AK-47 in the basement. That shit was funny. But that's it, man. So those are my key things of my success with environment in my grow area. Some of these things may vary. Make sure y'all comment down below and let me know. Appreciate y'all for joining me once again on another discussion video. The discussion has been doing really good on podcasts in the how-to category, man. So I appreciate y'all for that. And that's podcast listening only. Y'all can go and check out the podcast on anywhere you listen to podcasts, except for Pandora for some reason. They don't fuck with a nigga. It's been so long and they still ain't let me up in that bitch, man. But everywhere else, I'm in that biz, man. So make sure y'all follow me there. And appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all subscribe to all the channels. I'm Mr. GoodBuds, and we out.